on an issue like this transboundary animal disease called foot and mouth disease. We are here to come up with strategies to hear and point strategies on how do we deal with FMD. Quite a lot has happened over the past few months in terms of this FMD. It is about time that all of us get together and see how we move ahead. Our take has always been that we have got veterinarians who have been trained, animal health technicians who have been trained to deal with this issue of FMD. However, it is also very important that the conditions under which all of us were trained in terms of FMD were very different. We were trained with FMD, we still had fences, we still had a lot of rule of law in terms of many areas, and we observed them without even questioning authority. And therefore today we have got to say, how does science arise and becomes the center of how we deal with FMD? With us today, let us welcome the Minister of Agriculture, Minister John Steenhuisen. If you can just wave at those who are within this house, they all know you, but today just wave at them to say that you are here. And from the MSCs that we have today, we have got 3 MSCs from provinces that are really affected with FMD. And I'll go in alphabetical order. I'll first start with the Free State, MEC Rockford. And then KwaZulu Natal, we have got MEC Kamadopa Mtetwa. And from the beautiful province of Limpopo, we have got the MEC Wakasibanda Kekana. And we are blessed today because this is an a multidisciplinary approach that we are going to have. That we have got the National House of Traditional and Peasant Leaders today, represented by Akhusi. I would hope that we have got many representatives coming from the National House here. From the government's engagement, the President and also the CEO of the ARCs here, Dr. Indaba. And we have got HODs from the provincial departments of agriculture. They can just all rise. I know that they are in the house today. And we have got DDGs from the Department of Agriculture, and they are only 2, so I know them offhand. That is Rado who's leading the team here today, and Meko Martin who are here. And behind them is a team that is working on this in terms of the World Animal Health Organization, or what we call OWA these days. We have got the Chief Vet Officer here, Dr. Mbisani, and all the vets who are in this house. If you can just wave so that we can see you. Thank you very much. Our program for today is going to start in this way. We are all going to rise, and those with good voices, please sing the national anthem. And those who cannot sing like me, we will hum the song. Let us all rise. We would like those with beautiful voices to lead us.
Africa. Manu paradiso kondorayo Iswa imitanda so Yesu Kosi sikelela Tina nusaborayo Morena Sitshaba Yesu, ufekise lintwale matsenyeho, sibuluke, sibuluke, Sitshaba Yesu, Sitshaba South Africa, South Africa. Eilo van ons hemel, en die diepte van ons Heer. Ons ewige gebergtes, waar die kanse antwoord gee. Sounds the call to come together, and united we shall stand. Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land.
Everybody who thought that farmers could not sing should come and join us. Thank you very much. It is also a meditation that is enshrined in our own constitution of South Africa. You were wonderful singers. Thank you very much. You have disputed the theory that says that we cannot sing in the cultural sector. We can. As we begin with the engagements here today, we are at a place called the ARC. We would need to have a security briefing so that if there are any security breaches, we will know about those. If there are any emergencies, we can be able to respond in terms of the way that we are. Because in the unlikely event that something happens, we should be aware of what's happening. So I would like to call from the ARC the security detail in terms of the ARC to give us an outline.
Thank you, Didi. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tanel Zwanebo. I'm the physical security professional at the ARC. I'm going to do a quick security and emergency briefing for you. If there's a fire alarm, it will be in the form of an air horn. If you hear that, please calmly and swiftly move out to the exit points. The emergency assembly points are located right here on my left, on your right. There's a big board indicating the assembly points. If there's a medical emergency, we have an ambulance that will be on site. It will also be on my left-hand side, your right-hand side. Please note, this is a non-smoking facility. If you would like to smoke, please do so outside. The bathrooms are located at the back, to my right, to your left, the ladies and gents on that side. Registration, if you have not signed the registration document this morning, please during tea time or lunchtime, make a turn there at the registration table where you got the wristband to sign the register. Avoid any restricted areas. If you go into a restricted area, it must be accompanied by an ARC official. All the presenters, if you have not given your presentation to Kifilwe, please see her as soon as possible. And then I was also told that the presenters must keep the mics close to them for the sound to come through. And then the program is on a QR code presented on all 4 screens if you would like to download it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Swanepul. In Setswana, Swanepul is Panapudi. If you know Swanas, everything that and Babi specifically they will give what they understand. As we welcome Deputy Minister Kapa to the session. Now, Deputy Minister, I hate doing this to you because this is the part where I have got to welcome you to come and give an opening welcoming remarks to everybody who's here at the ARC. if I call you up. As she comes, please give a round of applause. I can understand today we're discussing something very serious. Normally we would clap until she's here. But today you are all forgiven.
Thank you very much, Program Director, our DG, the Department of Agriculture. I appreciate the fact that you call me when I just jumped off the horse, my horse outside. But in any way, let me extend my heartfelt greetings to all South Africans in this house. We are used to houses, maybe this is also another house. My greetings are because you were here in time and I was still arriving. Please forgive me for that. All the other challenges of the road, of the traffic, are not to be part of my excuse. Today, I'm honored, DG and Minister, and all the employees in the department, our professional entities that enable the Department of Agriculture in South Africa to not only be recognized in our own country, but in many other countries where we contribute. This is very much in line with our objective as a country to be always support those who suffer, whether through lack of skills, or we have to share the little that we have in the form of budget to be able to support them. We can't do this as politicians, as much as we would want to go to engage, to deal with political issues, but this particular one, fortunately, is only in your organization, in your management, and in your hands. I rise, therefore, to welcome you in our big city. Not the mother one. The mother one is elsewhere. We're going there after now. The other one, we're going there today. But this is in line. I know many people, DG, will always ask about availability of budget. No, the budget is not enough. Not even enough for the needs of our people. But it must be enough as per our constitution, that we will always intervene, engage, and also if you look into how the BRICS is operating and its programs, how G20 is actually supporting the entire country to ensure that we can change our policies towards betterment of all the peoples of the world. That's why we have that particular organization. It is therefore my belief that as we gather here, of which I welcome you, and because I will not meet you after now, I therefore want to say I wish you good engagements, bringing all your ideas, ensuring that your views, your ideas, your concrete experiential learning experiences are actually being forwarded to us, for us to tell the world and the villages. Sir, DG, I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DM, for the welcome, and my apologies for just taking you off the host onto the podium. Very quick one. As I was sitting, I was caught up with a very interesting situation. As I looked up, I saw a person with a very good belt, a belt that shows that she was a finalist for Miss South Africa 2025, and she's also here as a farmer. So we must ask Ms. Azale Tolo to just stand up so that you can recognize her. So who says that we cannot be hip and happening? Who says that we cannot have farming on hills and in hills? This is a sector that is on the rise, the sunrise sector. As I welcome the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. John Steenhuisen, who has just arrived from China, from a successful engagement in China, to come and address us and give us the opening, to give us the keynote address for today before we begin our sessions. Please welcome the Minister to the podium.
There's many things I thought I'd see at an agricultural gathering, but never did I think I'd see a former Miss South Africa. You're very welcome. Program Director, veterinary professionals, leaders from organized agriculture, colleagues from our provincial departments, our MECs from the various provinces, officials, stakeholders and partners and animal health, and of course all members of the agricultural family. It's both a pleasure and a necessity to open today's foot and mouth disease Indaba. This is a crucial gathering today, an unprecedented gathering, at a time when our livestock sector is under immense pressure, not just from the biological spread of disease, but from consequences of policy failures, institutional fatigue, and an outdated response model that no longer meets the scale or complexity of what we face. And the presence today of so many of the role players in the sector, scientists, regulators, provincial officials, producers, and private veterinarians, speaks to a shared understanding. An understanding that if we continue as we have, we will continue to fall short. And when we fall short, it's not only the state that pays the price, but also our farmers, our workers, our exporters, our retailers, and of course the public at large. Foot and mouth disease is not a new threat. We have faced outbreaks before, and many of you have lived through those. But the lessons of the most recent outbreak are sobering, and in some cases painful, and a cause for the introspection that we will be doing over the next 2 days. What we saw was a response system stretched to its limits, with breakdowns in communication, delays in vaccine availability, confusion over movement controls, and an alarming lack of readiness or cooperation at several levels of government. Farmers were unsure of the measures, provinces uncertain of the protocols, and while the virus spread, trust in the state's capacity to be able to deal with it were eroded. And one of the most damaging consequences of this outbreak was our inability to contain the economic fallout. Because South Africa has no functional regionalisation framework, the entire country has been penalised through the eyes of our trading partners, despite the outbreak being isolated and localised to specific zones. Exports of cloven-hoofed animals and their products were suspended or slowed, jobs were lost, And of course, the reputational damage to our animal health system is one that will take time and action and conscious steps to repair. And I think the core lesson from this is that we cannot continue to manage foot and mouth disease outbreaks with outdated structures and fragmented authorities, hoping that a patchwork of short-term measures will deliver long-term stability. We need to think about new ideas. We need innovative approaches. We need approaches that are science-based, constitutionally aligned, and most importantly, practically implementable. There's no use us developing plans in the corridors in Pretoria that are not implementable on the ground level. At the heart of this new approach is the imperative to regionalize our disease control framework. Every single credible trading nation in the world understands the principle of regionalization, and that an outbreak in one part of the country should not result in blanket trade restrictions for the entire nation. However, we remain behind in establishing, certifying, and maintaining disease control zones that can be recognized and understood by our international partners. Let me be clear, the failure to regionalize is not due to a lack of veterinary science. It is due to a lack of institutional coordination, legal clarity, and capacity. To address this, I can announce that I've appointed 2 senior veterinarians, Dr. Emily Mogajane and Dr. Nomsa Nisi, who have extensive field, government, and international trade experience to lead the development of a comprehensive national regionalization framework. The work of them will focus on defining and operationalizing regional disease zones for all major livestock sectors, of course in consultation with the industry. To supporting provinces to assume their responsibilities as prescribed in the Animal Health Act 2002, aligning disease control with our constitutional division of powers, and strengthening interdepartmental capacity to process export and import applications swiftly and credibly. It is not right that South Africa takes years to respond to import health questionnaires, delays that have cost us market access and often weaken our negotiating position. This is not a regulatory issue, it is a capacity issue, and we're now going to be taking steps to fix it. This is even more important given the issues that we currently face with the export system, particularly as it relates to the United States of America. Another crucial area where the system has not worked during the recent outbreak was vaccine availability. The National FMD vaccine bank was depleted, the production cycle misaligned with outbreak realities, and most notably, honest to put, biological products currently lacks the infrastructure to produce FMD vaccines at the scale and speed required to respond to outbreaks. As a result, we were compelled to import vaccines from Botswana to mount a response. Now, this situation can only be viewed as a stopgap measure, but cannot be viewed as sustainable for a country with South Africa's livestock footprint and the export ambitions that we have for the red meat industry in South Africa. Government is taking this seriously, and we are stabilizing OBP, but that is going to take some time. In the interim, we are securing imports and working to establish forward-looking supply contracts that will ensure minimum stock levels of FMD vaccines and other priority vaccines before the next outbreak, not after. But the reason why everybody is in this room today is because the message is very clear. The state cannot do it all on its own. That's why partnerships for growth are one of the key pillars of the Agriculture Department. So today I want to send a clear message to the industry. If you want predictability, then you're going to have to invest and partner with government. And we're calling on the livestock industry, especially the red meat, dairy and game sectors, to begin by partnering with us on vaccine procurement. It doesn't mean you have to put in place extensive measures to manage cold chains or manage the vaccines, but it does mean that, like in other agro industries, we establish a structured partnership that ensures that we are not caught unprepared again. The time has come to build a nationally managed but jointly funded vaccine bank, not only for foot-and-mouth disease, but for lumpy skin disease, brucellosis, Rift Valley fever, and all other controlled diseases that affect trade and production. This model has been tested and has worked well in other spheres of government. It is in the areas of public-private partnership that we've been able to overcome issues such as the electricity crisis in South Africa. And so it will require a public-private partnership to be able to get on top of foot-and-mouth disease. And lastly, we must confront the lack of infrastructure within our protection zones. As long as animals are forced to be moved illegally because of the absence of local abattoirs or feedlots, we will never be able to enforce movement control effectively. It is impossible for provincial and local government to roadblock every single route in or out of an area. And sadly, as we've seen in cases over the course of the last few months, people find a way to move animals out of disease management areas when the sale of that animal is the difference between whether that family can eat that week, or school fees could be paid that week, or income could be brought into a household that week. And so we need to make sure that we move towards ensuring that we enforce movement control effectively. Because this isn't just a veterinary issue, it's also a spatial and planning issue. It's a rural development issue. And that's why we'll be earmarking funds in this fiscal year to support the establishment of feedlots and abattoirs within the protection zones, particularly in Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, and Mpumalanga. These facilities must and will provide alternatives to the illicit trade or illicit movement of animals. They will create rural jobs and will help us then to enforce measures we need to ensure we maintain our FMD-free zones. To effectively reduce the spread of animal diseases, while also responding to the growing challenge of climate change, we must make a deliberate and sustained investment in scientific research and development. Government funding alone will not be sufficient. We're therefore calling on the industry to partner with us in the efforts to expand the scientific frontiers. In the coming weeks, I'll be meeting with the National Agricultural Marketing Council to determine how portions of statutory levies can be earmarked specifically for research and development, with a focus on animal health and climate resilience. The Agricultural Research Council, who are very kindly hosting us today, are South Africa's sole statutory research institution in this field, and they are undergoing a remarkable turnaround. For the first time in over a decade, the ARC has recorded a surplus, thanks to deliberate efforts by the department under the leadership of DG Ramasodi and his team to reinvest in its core scientific capacity. But much more is needed. We must elevate the ARC to the same level as its international counterparts by working in partnership with the University of Pretoria's Biosecurity Hub and by channeling industry levies into ARC-led research. I believe that doing this, we can build a coordinated, world-class research ecosystem that will help us to meet the biosecurity and climate challenges of our times. Colleagues, I want to also be clear. This Indaba is not about apportioning blame. It's not about finger-pointing or trying to get one over another sector or another part of our ecosystem. It's about putting our heads together to fix what is wrong and building a system that will serve all of us in negating and withstanding the next outbreak and the one after that. We must break the cycle of reactive containment and move towards a far more proactive coordinated disease management. To do so will require far more and strengthened provincial implementation, clearer national coordination, an empowered veterinary corps, and a private sector that sees biosecurity not as a burden, but as a precondition for growth. To ensure that these outcomes of this Indaba are not just aspirational, but actionable, I will be appointing a dedicated team after this gathering to consolidate the proposals that all of you will be making, as well as the insights that you'll be sharing today. And I want to re-emphasize, these 2 days are not about government telling you what to do. It's about us listening and understanding how you feel things can be improved and what you believe needs to be done to get us to a situation where biosecurity genuinely is everybody's responsibility. That task team will then be finalized with taking the information from these 2 days and putting them into a time-bound operational plan. One that reflects both the urgency of the challenge that we're facing, but also that reflects the collective wisdom contained in this room. This plan will be presented to me with a defined time frame and will serve then as the blueprint of all of our implementation going forward. So let us use today to be frank and honest with each other about what has not worked. Let us look at things that have worked. Let us bring to the fore ideas that we can scale, and let us commit not only in theory, but also in budget and action plans to building a livestock economy that is competitive, credible, and secure. Having just returned from China on Saturday this week, there is a world out there who are hungry for our agricultural products. They're literally desperate for them. And we need to make sure that we remove every single burden or obstacle that stands in the way. Biosecurity is a top concern of our potential trading partners around the world. However, I believe that both in a plant health as well as an animal health perspective, we can move to a situation where our products, our agricultural products in this country, become synonymous with the highest levels of biosecurity. What this means is we'll be able to demand not only new markets, but demand greater premiums for the agricultural products that we produce. And having traveled across large parts of South Africa, including in our rural areas, the potential for growth in the livestock sector in South Africa knows no bounds. If we can unshackle ourselves from these things that are holding us back, the sky is the limit for what we'll be able to achieve from an economic growth perspective, a food security perspective, but also from a jobs perspective in South Africa. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for the seriousness that you've shown, and I think the capacity of this room shows the commitment that people have to addressing this issue that is standing before us. I want to thank you for your expertise. Many of you have invested long hours into understanding foot-and-mouth disease, and we look forward to your inputs today. But most important, I want to say thank you for your partnership. Thank you for agreeing to work with government in a partnership that will ensure that all of us are able to reach a situation where our sector can grow and flourish. And so, without further ado, let us get to work. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steenhuisen. Since the days that I uttered my first words, I was not very good in terms of translations, and therefore I will not attempt to translate what the Minister was saying. At any rate, I cannot translate English into English. But I can summarize to say, the Minister is saying the external environment it's right for South Africa to reap the benefits. In South Africa, internally, we have got to make sure that from a biosecurity point of view, we have got our ducks in a row, and we can be able to punish these opportunities as they arrive. To do that, we have got to ensure that we identify with a very simple principle in terms of engagement, to say that where there is trade, there is risk, and where there is risk, we need to ensure that we have got our apparatus ready to deal with the issue around the appropriate level of protection, and that is why we are here today. Thank you very much. As we move ahead with our program, there will be a break in terms of the engagements today at 11:10, just to allow for the Minister, Deputy Minister, and all MECs and Kosimulef entourage to engage with the media. And I would also welcome that all representatives of this sector should also be at the media briefing, especially the captains of our industry, to be part and parcel of this media briefing. Thank you very much. As you allow me to go ahead, now we get into the details in terms of the engagement, and I will call an institution that needs no introduction, the Bureau of Food and Agricultural Policy, to come and do a presentation on the overview of FMD globally and in South Africa. And to this effect, I will call on Mr. Gerard van der Berg to come and do the presentation. I hope that the presentation is ready, and he is also ready to come and do the presentation. He likes the livestock industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DG, for the introduction. Just while the presentation is loading, thank you for our Minister and Deputy Minister and all the honourable. I have huge appreciation for the DGs and DDGs, Chief Directors. It is a room filled with esteemed guests. DG, also thank you for welcoming the captains of industry. I think the reality is within the context of today, the way the Minister introduced it, there won't be progress unless there's actionable working together, and we're looking forward to that. I see on the program it was written as Gerald van der Berg, which is good. It looks like it's an alias. It's not an alias name. So my name is Gerald van der Berg from BFAP. Whilst preparing this session, and I have basically 20 minutes to do it, I'd like to start off with that little figure, which is called that PCP program. I just want to... the Progressive Control Pathway. So when we think about FMD, there's been many years of work done in many countries, and we can learn from that. Key to that, though, is to understand what it looks like for South Africa, for our people, for the livestock that we have, and then ultimately bringing that to what can we implement as an industry. So starting off with some global perspectives, and I think throughout the day and tomorrow there'll be a lot of context, so I'm going to make it very brief. When we think about FMD and where we see the most outbreaks, it's basically Asia and Africa. South Africa being part of Africa, we are also very much exposed. If we look at Asia, what's quite fascinating, in 2022, there was a massive outbreak in Indonesia, more than 567,000 cases of FMD, which was the O type, and they had even more cases in buffalo, sheep, and other small livestock. And that was the first outbreak in a free zone since 1986, which just goes to show it is possible, which means active surveillance and management is key to managing that. So if we look at the other cases, there's a figure on the right-hand bottom. We look at Europe, we look at Africa, we look at Asia. Again, Africa and Asia being the most cases. Now, what's quite important from a world perspective, the status map, which is quite interesting, and I think Dr. Marja will talk to that later today and further on. South Africa currently in that map shows a June 2025, which is the most recent map. Currently, if you look at South Africa there at the bottom, it falls under countries and zones without an official status for FMD. And I know there will be a lot of talk on that throughout the proceedings. But what's quite important is look at South America, look at Brazil. Currently, member and zones recognized as free from FMD without vaccination. If you looked at this map 3 years ago, it would have been different. They would have been light green, but they have progressed. And we're going to learn from that, and a lot of the talk today will be on that. What is important though, and that's kind of the writing on the right-hand side, is FMD is managed differently across the globe. There's no silver bullet on how it gets managed, and ultimately, we also see that some countries are not part of RUA, and the way that they report and the way that we can account for that, we need to consider. So what can we learn from these countries, and why do we need to take these learnings from a South America and Asia perspective? If we look at our current status, and we look at our current trade partners, I just made a big circle there, Middle Eastern countries, again countries and zones without an official status of FMD. So South American collaboration against FMD, and I think why I specifically want to make it a continental view, it's the South American collaboration against FMD. We can't see South Africa in isolation, and I think this has been a lot of discussion about our regional partners, and our Deputy Minister also mentioned this. South Africa also needs to play our part within our neighbouring countries and where we can support, and the other way around. So if you just quickly look at that timeline, the last outbreak recorded back in 2006, 2007, the first free zone without vaccination, and that was in that Santa Catarina, so that's Brazil. 2018, the national recognition of FMD freedom with vaccination, again within this bigger South American collaboration. And then from there on, they progressed to a point where Brazil is actually now free without vaccination. So again, just quick and key learnings that we need to consider. Now these points that I just quickly highlighted, Brazil's route to FMD freedom, very briefly, zoning and vaccination, surveillance and monitoring, border control, training and capacity building, rapid response and containment, regular audits and international collaboration, innovation and adoption, stakeholder incentives and communication. All of these documents and learnings, they are recorded. There are guidelines, there is law, there are veterinarians out there that this is their life's mission, is to combat this disease. And I think again, throughout the collaboration and the talkings of this Indaba, we need to learn from that. If we bring it closer to home, domestic and regional FMD outbreaks. The figure on the right-hand side, that is South Africa, Namibia and Botswana. We start in that figure from 2005. There you can see Namibia and Botswana having more outbreaks than South Africa. But look at the last 5 years. Very little to no outbreaks in Namibia and Botswana. They have actually actively engaged with the disease, that they have had their protocols, traceability, vaccination, strategies, all of that implemented, and that can lead to great success. On the left-hand side, that figure, that's the South African number of animal disease outbreaks and cases over time, but it's expressed in the volume of meat affected. So you can see 2022, that big green bubble, that's where we're at close to 8,000 cases. If you just look at the red one in 2025, it's quickly growing to being the same size as 2022. So we need to combat very effectively. Now I want to take it down a little bit lower to the economics. And I think the key thing is, within the context of FMD, it is a major economic and trade disease, but it goes much wider. And I think that's the purpose of providing some context, hopefully, for the deliberations today. So just a view on this, and this is something that I know Tate Ramasori, our DG, is also close to his heart. It's about the environment, the people, and the economy. We need to factor all of this together. If you look at the resources that we have, there's a cap. We only have, about 60 to 70 million hectares of arable land, which means we need to use that wisely. If you look at the bottom left, that's the producers. Whether it's a commercial producer, whether it's a small-scale producer, small, medium, or large, It doesn't matter. If you look at the livestock industry, there are close to 13,000 producers just on the commercial side. Households in livestock, over 1 million households in livestock. Now we go to the right-hand side. South Africa, as a country, we're not in isolation. As our minister just mentioned, anything that happens across the globe does affect us, whether it's the tariffs that we already see, whether it's perceptions on how we manage our bilateral agreements, it will affect us. And why that map is so important is who it will affect is even more important. And that's where our role as industry and as champions in the industry, whatever we decide today will have an impact on millions of people in South Africa. At the top right, South Africa's GDP, if we just contextualize that a little bit more, the contribution to GDP, and we've done a lot of work on this. It was typically seen that agriculture contributes about 4% to GDP. When we take the further upward and downward multipliers, it's closer to 14%. And I think that's part of why this sector should be at the front of the agenda when our minister represents in cabinet, especially due to the livestock industry and the under-accounting that we see in the livestock industry. We're currently measuring formal, official slaughters, formal slaughters. What about the informal slaughters that we can't measure and the contribution back to GDP, upwards and downwards? And I'm going to try and cover just a quick view on that. So the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, we have to very briefly introduce that as well. There's a lot of work that has already gone in by representatives in this room. Agreements already made, strategies, implementation plans already on the table. The key thing now is implementation. How do we take that into the budget allocation? And what we wrote down there is it's doing more in a cost-effective way. That's what we would need to do. We need to basically grow the size of this cake, not cut it up into many small slices, because we can grow the cake. These different pillars that we have in the AMP, I specifically just quickly pulled out a snapshot for the livestock subsector, very specific interventions. And many of these interventions I can see in the program today is almost repeating itself. So it's already there, it's on the table. There are very well structured plans on how we need to implement, and I want to draw us to these different pillars going forward. Tying this to the industry captains, we see the red meat industry strategy already linking up with the AMP. So again, no duplication, just effective implementation. So if we go down a little bit deeper into some of these pillars, and specifically looking again at animal diseases, here we introduced FMD, avian influenza, and African swine fever. So the different bubbles representing the different diseases. Again, looking at that size of the bubble is a kilogram equivalent. So just look at the impact that we saw with avian influenza. Almost the same volume impact as FMD. And again, if we think about the consumer out there and the cost of that product and the impact back on the price of the product, it's a huge impact for our food security. On the right-hand side, if you look at that vet budget, the veterinary budget, we drew on this in the AMP, we talked about it. That comes out of the OIE gap analysis, the PVS gap analysis, and the vet strategy report. Back then, almost 4 years ago, we already saw a budget deficit of close to 800 million rand that the vet services industry would need to implement the vet strategy. Now, at the bottom left, we took the average annual increase in vet services budget since 2017. If you look at the total, about 4.7%. So there is investment and budget coming out of Treasury, and specifically in the Limpopo province, where that was 23.6% on average over the period 2017 to 2024, which is great progress. The key thing now is that enough? And if we take the total budget, about 1.46 billion rand in 2024-2025, already in 2020, you would have seen we needed 2 billion rand. So we are still under budgeted. We are still understaffed. The there's a massive backlog that we need to address. And I use the word we, as the minister said. This is not only government that can pick up that gap, but would need industry coordination and support as well. So what's very important is the food security link to this discussion today, F&B and the impact. I'm going to be very brief. So food security is about the access, the availability, the use, and the stability. Now if you just take those 4 pillars, we'll take the last one first, stability. What happened to prices over the past 6 weeks? We saw that in beef prices, we even saw it in poultry prices with AR. So if we don't have stability, it jeopardizes food security. If we look at the nutritional well-being, this food safety component, if we don't address that, in other words, not just F&D, but other diseases, it is a massive risk for food security. If we go to the left then, the physical availability, i.e. running out of access to food. The final one on access and affordability is, it is not just the product itself, it is disposable income, it is economic growth, it is jobs. We need jobs so that people have money to physically afford and buy the product. If we look at our meat consumption in South Africa, just look at the period there on the left-hand side from 2000 to 2008, the per capita consumption growth. And that growth effectively came from a movement of lower income consumers moving into middle income. And that's a positive story for South Africa, part of the grant system and how that effectively can stimulate demand in the market. But look at the last 5 years basically, not just our per capita consumption in red meat going down, but for all meat types. If we think about the protein availability and what we need in a balanced diet, that is concerning for South Africa. And again, a concern for food security. That per capita consumption going down. As I mentioned earlier, it is the people and it is the livestock. We need to see that collectively. Those 2 maps at the bottom, we're looking at poverty. The one on the left-hand side, poverty density. You can see that's all the metros. That's where poverty is concentrated. That's where we need high volumes of nutritious and affordable food for all citizens of South Africa. On the right-hand side is the incidence. In other words, that's the percentage of people in poverty in the local municipality. Just quickly see how that coincides with a huge portion of our informal livestock industry. And we've spoken about this, but again, from a contextual perspective for the Indaba over the next 2 days, that's where we see close to 5.6 million heads of cattle, more than 500,000 households actively engaged in beef cattle production. That's on the right-hand side. So you can imagine if we see what we're currently seeing, an impact on prices, how that will affect millions of people already in poverty, because that coincides in that geographic area. If we take it to the small stock, again, look at the right-hand maps. The left hand is the commercial, VAT registered farming. On the right-hand side, we're looking at the smallholder farming industry. Bottom right, that's more than 6 million goats that we don't account for them. We don't see them in our slaughter numbers. They don't officially get calculated in the contribution to GDP. But that is, again, close to 500,000 households that are affected by this disease, or that can be affected by this disease, if we don't manage it accordingly. Okay, so just kind of wrapping it up into some economics in the subsector. Yes, currently F&D is a huge crisis, but that's not the only one. We have seen persistently high feed costs over the past 5 to 6 years. We've seen a weak consumer environment in South Africa, which is basically dampening demand. So unless we address that, we also see stagnation in the industry and a huge risk of production losses out of this industry. Far right-hand side speaks for itself, the animal disease challenge. So a very quick view just on prices. And the map on the right-hand side, that's pork and poultry prices. Again, you can see these spikes, and typically the spikes come in when we are hit by a major disease, like avian influenza, African swine fever, and F&D. So when we think again about stability from a food security perspective, this is a huge concern. And I'm not going to go into the detail of these price movements. Taking one specific commodity, just a quick view on beef as an example. 2013, you can basically see that inflection point. That is when South Africa, where we regained FND free without vaccination, 2014. Effectively in 2014-15, we moved over to becoming a net exporter of beef. So that's only 10 years, which is kind of young for industry in South Africa, being in the export market. But what that meant down into the value chain was a lot more price stability. You can see the way that the A2 price reacted. You can also see the way that the wiener price reacted. And that price reaction feeds down to, again, the millions of people involved in livestock production. That's a price transmission that we talk about. Then you can see 2019 again, FMD outbreak. Look what happened to prices. Look what happened to wiener prices. And also to our exports. So we saw a drop in exports and our gain in 2025. So we do need to consider the balancing of the carcass. And I think this is one example again of a specific commodity, whether it's milk, whether it's on the sheep side, the wool side, each one would need to go into a deep dive of how do you balance your production, your costing structure, and the value that you need to create back into the value chain. If we just take the beef example, you see the carcass there on the left-hand side. Basically, everywhere where you see the South African flag, that's where the bulk of the carcass ends up in our local market. I.e., if we increase production, we increase the volume of affordable meat, because that's our lower, call it value cuts. You can see where you have the higher value cuts, those products go into the Middle East, China, Africa. China has a line through it already. But if you look at the Middle East, that's a big portion of the market. What that effectively does, that means the value chain uses that value and it pushes it in to the price formation. Why do we need that? Without that, we see huge losses in value. And I included that table at the bottom. Just a view on prices. If we look at carcass prices over the past 6 years, they have grown roughly about 5.2%. Wiener prices only 2.17%. But look at the fresh or chilled boneless cuts and frozen boneless cuts. That's about 6.9% and 9% growth. But most of that growth was not due to international prices, but due to a weakening of the exchange rate, which means it's an exchange rate effect. And without that effect, again, will we be competitive, and what drives our competitiveness? If you go down a little bit more, if you look at the beef fillet steak and you look at the beef mince, use that as a proxy of how the carcass can be balanced. Beef mince being kind of your lower value, that only grew by about 4.85%, which is a positive story for our lower income consumer, positive story for food security in South Africa. But look at the costs. Fuel, feed, electricity, on average growing at 11%. So if you are in this value chain, in the livestock industry, and you just look at fuel, feed, and electricity growing by 11%, your carcass price by only 5.2%, your wiener price by only 2.1%, that's not a good story for the industry. And that is why we need market access and we need growth. We need to balance that carcass in order to unlock that growth. And that growth means a positive impact not just on commercial agriculture, but for the full industry. Just 2 scenarios that we ran. The medium-term burden of FMD for the country. So, and what we say by medium term, we're referring there to the current outbreak being actively, call it conquered, because it is a war. And by conquering, we mean it gets kind of closed down in the current feedlots and abattoirs currently be affected. Some of our exports we lose, but we recover by 2028. That would require massive engagement from a bilateral perspective, massive engagement from a vaccination strategy, everything that's going to be discussed today. If we just see that dip, and that dip is our share of exports, dropping from about 4.5% to about 3%, and then we recover again back to 5%, and we kind of hit the trajectory that the industry needs. Just with that, we already lose out on 3.2 billion rand in gross production value over the next 5 years. If we take that over the next 10 years, that's about 4.5 billion rand. If we take call it the high burden scenario, the one where we lose all grip on the disease, that escalates obviously a lot more. We're looking at about 11.3 billion over the next 5 years, and about 25 billion over the next 10 years. So, and that's what we lose from a gross production value. And I'll talk about the rest of the value that we lose as an industry. So again, within the context of budgetary allocation, of opportunity cost, that is what we can lose as the industry. Just a last example of what we can't measure, but it's kind of a very quick calculation. I mentioned now that gross production value loss. That's kind of the first line there. If we just take the backgrounding feedlot and abattoir component of the value chain, we look at the primary production component of the value chain, and then the downward portion of the value chain. That's not even measured in that gross production value loss that the industry can incur. So, from a backgrounding feedlot and abattoir perspective, it is, and I mean, I think there are many people here that can talk about this. That's 2 months without slaughtering, 5 months with no production of slaughter from last FMD cattle. It is your feed conversion losses, it's the 5th quarter loss, it is overhead losses, and if we just take that component, between 5,000 to 7,000 rand per head lost. If you look at the primary production component, that's where you lose market access. In other words, a producer in the vendor district can't go to an auction, sell cattle. No producer, because you can't move the cattle. You look at the genetic value deterioration. You look at losses in productivity. Again, weight gain, fertility, milk production. If you look at the downward portion, logistical companies, auction houses, animal products, vaccinations, vitamins, etc., not being sold. So that calculation becomes a lot bigger. In fact, you can basically double the first calculation on gross production value. So again, opportunity cost, what do we stand to lose? Why the urgency? Just specifically on FMD. And then maybe just on a last note, industry drive, war support, and we have many examples to learn from. I think unfortunately, us as South Africans, we think we are unique. We think we are different with, communal production and small villages, etc., etc. This one example drawn out of, they refer to the West Asia. So that's Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, etc. This was one initiative where the PCP, where they went the full route. And just look at how they managed to think about it. And there at the bottom right, that's typically what the minister also said, don't forget me when you make your paper strategies. And you can see that producer looks like a small producer in the Eastern Cape, but that producer is effective. And the reality is what we can learn from these countries and strategies that were already managed to implement, combining different species. There you see dairy farms, you see beef farms, you have small villages, you have trading villages, you have small stock, large stock. All of that is already taken into consideration. So what can we do? And they effectively managed to, I think they are currently at stage 4 of the PCP process. It is possible, but it would require an urgent intervention, which currently we're seeing today. With that, I would like to thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Gerard. I'm not counted with those who butchered your surname and your name, but I like the way that you have accepted that. What a sobering presentation. A presentation that elevates the discussions today beyond FMD to say what we are facing here is a food security threat, and a food security threat that do not need all of us to be at one. I think there was also a very interesting take that you had heard that I would like us to have a reflection on. The OECD says the prospects in terms of growth in South Africa for 2026 is 1.4%. You have indicated that the gross production value loss at medium scale in terms of your projections will be 3.2 billion. Can we afford that 3.2 billion loss? Because if it does, then it affects the GDP of the country. So that's how huge this problem is and how we need to respond to it. I think it's a very somber movement, it's a very sober presentation that they're giving. Can we give him a round of applause? I am going to go to the FMD diagnostics, and I know that in terms of the engagements, the ARC is an institution that is given the responsibility for producing FMD vaccines in South Africa. They have what we call an FMD facility that was closed down some years back. They are now working back towards having an FMD facility and also ensuring that they can be able to produce. And as we move ahead, I think that's something that we have got to look at. The presentation will deal with the diagnostics, will deal with research and vaccine production. And for that, we have got a tripartite alliance of Dr. Mudemwemba and Dr. Chitre and Dr. Beta. Now, I would like to give you I'm giving an indication coming from Datisaraj that I should give you a break. And what I will do is that I'll give you a break for the next few minutes. Let's make it 20 so that you can have tea. But at the same time, let us also have a media engagement with the principals so that we can be able to offset in terms of time, and then we can come back and reconverge in this hall exactly at my 20 minutes in my small village. I will extend it to 11:20. Let's be back here at 11:20. Thank you very much.